I'm Meg Wilbur, and today I've been challenged with explaining prosthetic makeup in 11 levels of increasing complexity. Special effects makeup is a really broad umbrella. There's old age, bald caps, body painting, vase painting, all sorts of different things. I'm defining complexity as flourishes, different textures, the small minutia details that are often overlooked or are not easy to replicate. Level 1, temporary tattoo application. Crafting a demon can be approached in a lot of different ways. I have decided to create mine around the idea of someone going and getting a tattoo that didn't quite mean what they thought it did, travels through their bloodstream and turns them into a demon. For this step, we're going to be using something called Prosthetic adhesive, sort of like a liquid Band-Aid. It's literally a medical adhesive. I'm laying down a layer of adhesive to help the tattoo transfer stick to the skin just a little bit better. We are going to put on a layer of Prosthetic on top of that, and that's just to seal it into the skin to really make sure that it's not going to go anywhere. That's just another layer of insurance. And then after we get that layer of Prosthetic on there, we're gonna powder it down. This is gonna help marry it into the skin. It's also gonna keep the Prosthetic from being sticky. And after we get that layer of powder on there, our final step is to kind of wipe it off, make sure that it's all matted down and ready to go. Level 2, multi-brush application. So for this one, we're going to use a nice red tone to really express how irritated and angry this tattoo is. It's starting to get infected. And the way that we're going to apply it is using stipple brushes. Stipple brushes are duo fiber brushes. You can always identify them. They have a short section of bristles and a long section of bristles. So I like stipple brushes for this in particular because they give a almost pointillistic, just gives you something nice and soft that you can continue to work with. So in this level, we are introducing the use of alcohol paint, and the reason that I like alcohol paint the most is because you can use it like a watercolor. It builds up in washes and it looks really subtle. If you think about skin as an organ, it's layered on top of other things, and alcohol paint has the translucency to mimic actual things that happen on your skin without looking as opaque and kind of stagey as a cream makeup might. Level 3, veining. We're at the part of the story where the infection is starting to enter the bloodstream. So the brush that I'm going to be mainly using for this is a very, very fine point brush. It's a 610. In order to get the effect of really cool veining, which is just to show the actual veins or capillaries of your arm, we are going to be using our stippling technique. It leaves behind these little points every so often, and I like to use them as the groundwork for creating really cool veins. The cool thing about alcohol paint is that because it is applied in washes and it is so translucent, you don't have to be committed to anything. And because we've stippled paint on and there are voids and areas where there's not as much paint or there's no paint at all, you can get away with doing things like that. If you oversaturate the skin with alcohol and attempt to touch paint onto it, it'll bleed, it'll balloon or blossom. And another thing to look out for is you can't use a ton of pressure and drag it across with multiple colors. You'll start to pick up the layers underneath. It is very easily reactivated. Level 4, creating dimension. So far, all of our techniques have been two-dimensional techniques. For this level, we're adding an additional third dimension to things, so we can pop out some blisters and really add to our look by giving it a little height. For this level, we're gonna be using a 2-part silicone complex. They stay totally uncured when they're separate. When you mix them together, they cure into little silicone pieces and they can go right on the skin. It's a platinum-based silicone, and I'm gonna add a catalyst to it to just make it cure just a little bit faster. That way we can make sure that our little dots that we put on the skin stay kind of raised dots. After we get those dots on the skin in the areas that we want them, we're going to add a little bit of alcohol paint on top of them just to give them a little extra pop to really show that they are kind of pussy and infected. I'm going to be using a filbert brush to go in and around these little blisters that we've created to give them a little more dimension. And I'm going to use a flat-ended brush to add the yellow color to the blisters. I am using yellow because yellow pus, and I'm going to be using a little more of that angry red color around the base of those pustules so that I can really pop them out and make sure that they read well. Next level, I'll be increasing complexity, introducing texture to our look. Level 5, creating texture. We will be using something called Egyptian magic. Egyptian magic is something that you can use to add a glossy sheen to your pieces. Many industry professionals use KY jelly for almost everything. And for this, we don't really need it to be goopy or gooey. We just want it to be very slick and wet looking. So I tend to gravitate towards the Egyptian magic because it's easy to apply. It's shiny without being too shiny. It's not too wet. It's not too runny. You can kind of control it pretty well, and it really makes things look quite good. So the way in which we're increasing complexity is by increasing our visual language. In order to do that, we are adding different levels of texture, different pieces to really make it come together. If you wanted to make something goopy or gooey, like think about Neo coming out of that pod for the first time in the Matrix, that's a substance called methacellulose, which is a plant-based food thickener, totally consumable, totally flavorless, but it is actually something that you would buy as a powdered substance and then boil on the stove. I know because I've done it. Level 6, prosthetic application. So story-wise, our model is now going fully off the deep end and becoming a full-on demon.
For the sake of the schedule of our episode, we've gone ahead and acquired a pre-made demon face appliance. In a larger production, I would prefer to craft my own demon face to control as much of the creature's design as I possibly can.
And in order to achieve this look, we are going to be applying a full face facial prosthetic appliance, as well as 2 ear appliances, 1 to each ear, and then 2 sets of horns.
I've asked our model to go ahead and insert his own contact lenses prior to our facial transformation as a safety precaution.
For this level, I'm gonna have my friend Brittany Turpin help me. She is going to assist me through the application process, and in order to make our application as easy and seamless as possible, our first step is going to be to prep the skin. We're gonna use another round of that toner. This time we are also going to apply something known as Skin Saver. It's a lotion that you put on that acts as a barrier cream. Your skin on your face is very thin, much thinner than the skin on your arms or the skin on your legs. So we want to treat it with a little bit more TLC. Removing a full facial appliance at the end of the day can be quite a task, and we want to make sure that he walks away feeling as fresh as a spring chicken. Our second step is going to be gluing down our model's eyebrows, which might seem crazy, but we will be using a silicone-based adhesive known as Talysis. The next part of this application will be holding the facial appliance up to Andrew and seeing how it fits him. We're gonna decide on exactly how we want it to be placed, and then we're gonna take a powder puff and powder around the edges of it so that we know exactly where we want it to lay, so that when we go to actually glue everything down, we know exactly how it lines up on his face. Since we are using generic prosthetics for this, it is kind of impossible to say if things will fit him perfectly until we see it near him, and it's very likely that they won't fit like a glove. It's very common for there to be minor fit issues, especially if you don't get a makeup test. There's a variety of ways that you can handle that. Sometimes we use things called blenders. They're little patches of very thin foam latex that you can just apply to bad, saggy, crazy edges to kind of make sure that people can't see them. For this application, we're going to be using the same silicone glue that we used to glue down our model's brows instead of the Prosthetic that we used for the tattoo. There's something that goes with it called thinner, which just kind of thins out the consistency of that very thick silicone-based glue. And sometimes, instead, you can use that thinner to lift an edge that got pushed down too quickly. It adds so much more flexibility to your application, whereas with Prosthetic, once it's down, that's it. That's all you got. Good luck. For our next level, we'll be increasing complexity by painting and sealing with Pax paint, which will seal the foam and also help us start to match our model's skin tone. Level 7, stippling with Pax. So in this level, we are going to be using something called Pax paint, which is a mixture of Prosthetic adhesive and acrylic paint. The reason that we're going to be using that next is because we must seal the foam completely before we can move on to using any of our airbrush or alcohol colors, because foam is really porous and it will absorb anything that's super wet if you don't seal it first. So the acrylic and Prosthetic mixture creates a film, a plastic film over it that is totally skin safe. Acrylic paint is very flexible, so this mixture of it and the adhesive actually flexes with you, so you'll still be able to move all around without it cracking off like you would think that house paint would. But it also seals it so that we can then in our next steps use our favorite paints to really make things come to life. In level 2, we used alcohol paint and brushes to do stippling. In this level, we're going to be using non-latex white sponge to create a very similar type of texture, but we're using sponge because the PAX paint can easily ruin your brushes, and those brushes are quite expensive, so we want to make sure we take very good care of them. In order to create that texture with the sponge, what I do ahead of time is I will take the sponge and rip it up and then use that to create this kind of dimensional texture with our PAX paint. The worst mistake you can make with PAX paint is to use way too much of it. It is a nightmare to remove. There are instances in which we'll use PAX paint, like on hands for movies where, you know, it's a totally blue guy and you have to do what you have to do, but it's not preferential to use PAX paint anywhere except for where you absolutely need it. Level 8, spattering.
While it may seem like applying the prosthetics is actually more difficult than what our next step is going to be, it's something that has to be done before we can achieve our next level.
I'm going to be using one of my favorite airbrush guns to help elevate our look of actual skin texture and actual skin color. So we will be really trying to nail down that skin tone and nail down the look of our skin. We don't really want to touch it after this level to adjust the skin. We're just gonna move on to other parts of painting after this. I like to use the spattering gun to start things off at least. There are plenty of other spattering. You can use a chip brush that you cut off the top. I like to start with my airbrush because it's the most uniform spray. Whereas when you're doing something by hand, it is kind of dependent upon how you are flicking it, how it's feeling. Because I'm also trying to nail a color, I want to make sure that my color is uniform before I start adding in more unique touches. The reason that I am going to use the chip brush near the eye area is because we want to blend down those edges, but I know that I'm going to be doing a different than flesh paint scheme in the eye area ultimately, so I'm not quite as concerned with the uniformity of that in the eye area. And I'm going to be using my airbrush gun for the overall effect on the rest of the prosthetic. The types of paints that we're going to be using for this, not just skin tone paints, but we are also going to be using color adjusters as well. Color adjusters that you might come across even in the makeup store when you go, you know, you get your corals, you get your rose adjusters, you've got olive adjuster. I'm a big fan of adjusters. I love them. I feel like they are the easiest way to make things really start to look real. You can get kind of caught up in the minutia of using a bunch of different skin tones, but at the end of the day, once you've gotten in the realm of your skin tone, it will really be up to the adjusters to kind of come in and save the day for you. If your paint is super thin, you're gonna wind up doing about 7,000 passes with your airbrush gun before you finally start to see something happening. But you don't want your paint to be too pigmented as well, because then you're just gonna see like freckles like everywhere, just a million freckles of everything, and that gets to be very overwhelming. It's a push and pull of, okay, for this pass, I think I'm gonna do super translucent, then maybe the next pass with a different color, I'm gonna get a little bit bolder with it. We're gonna back off with the translucency. You really learn those things through trial and error. I try to start pretty loosey-goosey with it, and then once I start feeling like, okay, we've got our skin tone nailed down, I'm gonna start adding my freckle tone. I'm gonna add my dark freckle tone. I just like to make sure that I give myself a little bit of wiggle room so I'm not like committed to a barrage of dots off the bat. In our next level, we're going to be increasing complexity by starting to really hone in on our character. We're going to be using techniques known as modeling and patterning to breathe a new life into this character now that we have already nailed down the fleshiness and the skin tone of it, and just start to really make our character sing. Level 9, modeling and patterning. Modeling is a term that refers to what happens with blood in the skin of dead bodies, and it is this very dappled kind of blood pooling that happens. It is something that we use as a technique of paint application in the special effects world, not just when we're simulating, zombies or dead bodies, but also that term has come to transcend just that application and start to refer to the look of breaking up the skin in a way where the paint kind of ebbs and flows, where you get some areas that have this definition and other areas that don't have it quite as much. And it's a very gorgeous technique. Patterning, think of it like a snake. It's like the actual pattern of how the paint is going to go on or how your look is going to wind up. I am going to achieve our modeling and patterning through use of a more precise airbrush gun. This is going to be a smaller spray pattern and a smaller airbrush gun in general. And I am going to use modeling techniques. Some people kind of refer to it as like your crazy eights or your 8 pattern. It's my favorite, and it's one of the easiest to kind of fly through. But it is really just a way of applying paint in a non-uniform way to break up the skin. And I will pattern over that with the same airbrush gun in a very similar manner to how we did our veining. I'm gonna follow the lead of my modeling and see how it turns out and where it goes, and then I'm gonna go in there and kind of, I like to dot with my patterning, so we're gonna do that. This is the level and the step in this application where you can really let your artistry come to the forefront of things. In the previous levels and the previous steps, we've been just focused on trying to create as much realism as possible, and this is where fantasy starts to take over. This is where your ideas and your beliefs about how you want your character to turn out, that's where this can kind of come to the party and take the lead. Level 10, dry brushing and marrying. In level 10, we're increasing our complexity by using the techniques of dry brushing in particular, and also the idea of marrying all of our things together. We will be using these to just solidify what we've done in the previous levels and make sure that everything comes together to create one very uniform and very put together piece. Previously to this, we have ignored the eye orbit a bit, and we are going to be using cream makeup to really bring our paint job down into the eye orbit. We're gonna use a little bit of eyeliner in the eye to marry our effects paint job and our actual like areas that I wouldn't wanna use alcohol paint, for instance. I'm not gonna use alcohol paint on somebody's eyelid, that's a little mean. I am going to use beauty makeup in a non-conventionally beauty way to bring some more life into this and to really keep things in the realm that I want to keep them in, which is to move away from human and to move into fantasy. And I'm going to be using a technique known as dry brushing. Previous to this, we've been using wet application techniques where the paint is very wet as we apply it. In this, in particular with the horns, we're going to use a dry brushing technique, which is where you try to get as much of the water, or whatever you use to activate with, off the brush and keep the pigment on it, and then brush that onto the horns to enhance the texture of it, and then leave some of that paint that was already on the horn in the areas that you want it. So really what this does is it adds pigment to the raised parts of the piece and leaves what you already had into the crevices and recesses of it. Level 11, final reveal. For the final level, I am taking a dental impression from my model, and I am going to create a custom set of dentures for him so that we can add something special to this that is not purchasable in stores like every other piece that we have done previously. I'll also be adding nails to the look and a little bit more flair, a little demon blood, a little sass there. And these elements are often overlooked, but so important to helping tell a story. They really change the entirety of the makeup. They really help sell it a little bit more, and I find them to be some of the most fascinating parts of makeups. I mean, think about all the scary things that you've seen with like creepy teeth all over them. So like, yeah, we're gonna add a little creepy teeth to this guy. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys learned something new about prosthetic makeup that you didn't know before, and hopefully I've piqued your interest enough to help you win the Halloween costume contest this year at your job. Good luck!